Preparing to live stream the meeting. Setting up. Oh, we're doing better this time.
Oh, we're good. Good.
Okay. Did we go on? Okay, good.
Yeah,
Good.
we're on that.
So it's definitely just preparing to live stream the meeting. Okay, it was definitely just poor tech on my part. So hi, YouTube people. We finally got you on. Let's see. We're being live streamed, and I think we're still being recorded. So,
Yeah.
okay, cool.
Oh
So
yeah.
let's see. We were just talking about atheists.
Oh yeah. I was watching a new video out by Jubilee. Usually they get in group and out groups together and like it's like a debating center kind of thing. Uh but this time it was only one atheist person, Alex O'Connor. And he has like a whole atheist channel that I've been subscribed to for a while. And he's going up against 25 Christians. So I'm only 2 minutes in, and it was so interesting. It's
Yeah,
like,
so you haven't really got the arguments yet.
no, but I'm aware of them, and to me, it's more socially interesting, and I think for everyone else too. I think debates in general, I don't think it's like I mean, it can be a source of learning, but it's more of entertainment. It's just like socially stimulating.
Yeah, yeah. Well, from the non-dual point of view, the idea of God is just problematic because it's something outside of yourself. There's
Hmm.
you and there's God.
Hmm.
And so the second you have two things, and then there's lots of people who try to deal with the problems of God by saying, I'm God.
Yeah.
Yeah, or God is in me,
Yeah.
but you still kind of have
Yeah.
two
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
there. And
Yeah.
it's really hard to take the human brain that's been conditioned into
Yes.
duality and realize how interconnected we
Yeah.
actually are. But then on the other hand, the idea of God is just a very interesting human idea,
Yeah.
and thoughts do exist and ideas do exist, and they're worthwhile talking
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it's mythology is poetic, right? Like it reflects
right,
something, right?
right. Yeah,
And but a lot of the Sufis, they had a lot of problem with the literalist interpretations, right? And
mm-hmm,
that's something that I think we're actually gonna dive into too with the topic, right?
right.
So should I start? Just introduce it.
Yeah, yeah. So
Okay,
I'm
so
gonna,
yeah,
so we're talking about the four stages of Sufis, right?
yeah.
And
So
so
yeah, go
what
on.
I want to do is I want to rip it apart and say, this is a terrible idea, and then put it back together and go, this is why it's a really good idea.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So, yeah, okay. So, and I'm not a scholar in history at all. I'm going to be doing a lot of guest work, and I just, but this is just how I understand the stuff, right? I wouldn't
Mhm.
take this as any kind of academic source. Anyways, and no one's even watching this, anyways. But
Yeah.
anyways.
Hey,
So,
about 30 people or so watch them afterwards.
oh hell yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So,
okay.
yeah. So hi,
So,
people.
so the so in early Sufism. um they had they had this roadmap of enlightenment, right? And
Right.
so and they kind of stated that there's like four stages, right?
Hmm.
So I may also be mispronouncing this, but Shariat, right, is the
Hmm.
first,
Hmm.
Tariqat is the second, Hakikat, third, and Marifat, right? So what the hell does that mean? So Shariat, Sharia, right? What we hear, it's
Right.
like rules, right?
Oh, right, right, right. I didn't
Yeah.
put that together.
Yeah.
Right, right, right.
So Sharia has to do with like the do's and don'ts, the rights and wrongs, right? The good and
Hmm.
bads.
Hmm.
Um, maybe if you want to probably like do some commonalities with like Buddhism, you have like the Eightfold Paths, I think. It's like they
Yeah,
have
that's
the
that's one of them. Right, right. And
non-stealing.
Hinduism. Hinduism
Yeah, the
has.
Raja Yoga, they have like ahimsa.
Mhm.
I think what was it? It was like satya, which is truthfulness, right? So
Mhm.
it's like, just the first stage is all about good and bad, right and wrong.
Right.
Um, and so like, this actually reflects like fundamentalist Islam like pretty well, right?
Right.
Um, what can help with this first stage is taking it literally, like is taking, maybe quote unquote mythological stuff as literal, right? Like, no,
Mhm.
like, hell isn't an analogy. It's not a heuristic. It's an actual thing, right? And like an actual thing as in a realm and all this, right?
Right.
And then like it's helpful. Um, And so they say that's the first stage. And that's not like the esoteric part of Islam. That's like, the general stuff, right?
Right.
Like you don't go to a sheikh to learn this stuff. It's just general population stuff.
Right. You're taught it when you're a little kid. This is how you're
Mhm.
a good person.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So the second stage, tariqat, I'm not sure what word. Oh, tariq. Tariq means in Arabic, literal path, like like
Path,
this,
the method. Right. Right.
right? Like the method, exactly, right? So
Mm-hmm.
tariq is like, oh, I'm going this way, right? And it's like a road. So the second stage, the Sufis would say is like, okay, now you're like purifying the heart, right? Now you're like, purifying the mind. Or I
Right.
would say it's and maybe you can even say like this is like, just coming to logic as well. It's like, okay, well, I was like as a baby, right? You're just told, don't go near the water, right?
Right. Don't
And it's
burn
just like, oh,
yourself.
okay.
Right.
And
Yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
why, right?
Right.
But as
Right.
you grow up, now it's just like, okay, let me think. Oh, okay, that makes sense why I don't want to freaking go in the water and die,
Right.
right?
Right. Look both ways before you cross the street.
Look both ways, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not just like listening now. It's like, oh, it's like this makes sense. There's a
Uh-huh.
reason probably for this.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so so I'll probably get back into it later, but so the third stage is hakikat. Hak is also one of the names of God in the 99 names. Hak means truth, right?
Truth. Mm-hmm.
So here is like you're starting to like get closer and more away from the literalist interpretations, more away from thoughts, maybe more away from concepts. Um, this is probably in, you know, Eastern traditions as like, having Satori experiences, you
Hmm.
know.
But it's also why you look both ways before you cross the street.
Yes. Okay. So like now you're also like, okay,
Right.
that makes sense. And it's just like, it's,
Because there's actually a truth. There's actually a reason
yes. Yes.
why. Yeah. Some of them are really arbitrary
Mhm.
and you
Yeah.
never find a reason, but
So hakikat though is like, you know, you are not separate. That's also like, like you've kind of like come to this idea, right? And it's like it's making more sense.
right.
And
Right.
so also historically, this is also when you're probably like I would say historically because like this system itself is like old. And like this is when like you would have a sheikh underneath, right? So like it would be more organized in a way like, oh, once you get to this stage, like you have a sheikh with you, right?
Right.
So hakikat is like, you're probably with like a master and knowing yourself as not separate
Or a
is
really good mother.
or a really good one. Yeah, there you go. And so and this is also probably dissolution of beliefs, doubt, uncertainties and stuff, right?
Hmm.
So last stage is the marifat, right? And I don't even know what that word is. I can't even guess. But this is nirvana, basically. This is like the moksha. This is just the Sufis would say fana or not fana or beka, I think. Bekat. So like
Mhm.
this is like it's not just a Satori experience. It's like, it's just done, right? Like it's just continuing. Zareen would say, I never forget who I am. So that would be like the words of like the last stage, right?
Right. The guy that the video that you sent me said, it's where you see no tr untruth anywhere.
Mhm. Anyway,
Just like there really thoughts do exist.
yes.
Your thought about God is actually a thing.
Yeah.
You know, your belief is a thing.
Yes.
Yes.
So, yeah. So, this is a useful roadmap for, you know, probably just the first two stages, right?
No, for the whole thing, for the whole
Or the
thing.
whole thing, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
enlightened people love to say, that we're all enlightened anyways. It's all the muddy fat anyways. It's all the baka anyways. Like none of
Right.
the system is like it's a tool, but it's not like real,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
Have you ever had time to look at the videos I send with the Navajo elder
yeah,
guy,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Navajo traditional teachings? So
Yeah.
what's really interesting is he says these exact same things.
Hmm.
And I mean, like historically and geographically,
Oh
right?
no,
They're
like completely different.
completely separate. And
Yeah.
yet here he is saying the
Hmm.
exact same things. The difference is that he's not saying them as a continuum.
Not a continuum.
They
Yeah.
all kind of happen at the same time, and it's your choice,
Yeah.
right? And so they call it the beauty way, is what he called
Nice.
it.
Nice.
And lots of people like to think, oh, the beauty way, that's just this little cloud of fluffy marshmallows that we get to,
Yeah.
float around in. But he's like really insistent. He's like, no, this is a really, really hard road to walk. He calls it the red road. And yeah, but you do them all at the same time. But the difference between what he's talking about and what I hear in the Sufi stuff and all the Eastern stuff is that I don't want to say you're considered enlightened from the beginning, but you're never considered unenlightened.
Hmm.
You're a human being to
Yeah.
start out with.
Yeah.
And so you're a human being, there's nothing wrong with you,
Yeah.
but you can make the choice of being an asshole and being a terrible person, or you
Mhm.
can make the conscious choice of, you know, your first one, the Shariat,
Yeah.
right? The Sharia,
Yeah.
and you don't need a book full of these rules, although all Native communities have really, really strict rules of
Yeah.
behavior. Yeah.
Well, that's just the thing, right?
Uh-huh.
Like looking at it in the context of like,
Right.
when, you know, Prophet Muhammad came and stuff, it's like, man, Arabia was fucked. They were so crazy, but they were like, they would have a daughter and just be like, I'll just bury this thing, right? And
Right.
it's,
Yeah. That's no good.
yeah. So like, it is I've always said it's completely fair to call Muhammad a political leader just as much as he is a spiritual teacher, right? If
Right.
not more, like if
Hmm.
a political leader more. And that's just like what was
Although in many ways, like, are those really different things?
what do you mean? Oh,
Because
spiritual leader, political leader. Yeah,
yeah, I
that's
mean,
a good way to put it. Yeah.
you need to, religion is different than spiritual, right? You
Yeah.
put religious leaders in charge of a government,
Yeah.
and they'll just do whatever crazy
Yeah.
thing they want to
Well, I
do.
mean, just like compared to Jesus, right? Like Jesus didn't care like about like setting up rules or like taking land or whatever, right?
But the story of Jesus, he lived 3 years.
True.
Now
Yeah.
imagine they hadn't killed him. Would he have turned into Muhammad?
Yeah.
Why not? So, and actually, if you go back and you study Judaism at the time, we have so whitewashed it
Oh
because
my God, bro.
because it was very, very violent and very political. And you can understand even why, because they'd been like conquered, right? You know, the battle that we have going on today was going
Yeah,
on then,
yeah,
the exact same
yeah.
battle. And there was these guys, golly, what were they called? But they were trained assassins, and what they had was these sharp little knives hidden in their robes, and they'd like just walk through the crowd and just murder someone. That was, I mean, it was a really big deal, and the whole um, war that destroyed Jerusalem. I mean,
Hmm.
all that. So, why would we assume that Jesus wouldn't have turned into Mohammed?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, he was just 3 years in.
So I'm gonna argue, right,
Yeah,
that
okay, good.
like I mean, like it's just because so like in it actually has to do with this four stage thing, and it actually makes a lot of sense in context, in historic context. Because like if we look at it, anyone that explicitly said, like, I mean, even I'm hesitant to say something like I'm not separate from God. Like that's still very stigmatized. There are bad things that are gonna happen to me if I go out and say that right now, right? So
Right. Yes.
imagine back then, and we already saw it, Jesus did get crucified. You have Sufis like Al-Halaj that did get crucified, right?
Right.
And it's
Right.
just like, I mean, like it makes sense to have this kind of system where it's like, okay, the esoteric stuff comes later. Like at least for public, like because of social reasons, because we are still living amongst human beings with very, very heavy and dangerous conditioning, it makes sense to just go little by little, right? Because there's still a social human aspect to this. If I was isolated though, you know, these systems, like, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And it's just like I can go out and just speak my truth. But could Jesus do that? No, I mean, he couldn't because look what happened the
Well,
moment he did.
obviously not. But could Mohammed, like, how did Mohammed manage to pull it off?
Well,
Like,
he,
because he was in Mecca. Remember, that wasn't the first battle they lost, and he
yeah,
had to run away, and they
yeah,
all hid. I mean, for years while
yeah.
he amassed his armies and everything.
Well, and that's just from him saying, hey guys, like God is more than these idols, right? Just
Right.
that was like, get the hell out of here, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it's like, so and I think how he managed to do it, I'm gonna guess, it really was like I think that a theme you still see even in fundamentalist Islam is, like you're nothing compared to God. Like you're just like nothing, like you have the phrases like Allahu Akbar, right?
Right.
God is greater, right? So
Right.
like you can't like when priority wise, you can't say me, you can't say that or this, right? So it's like,
Uh-huh.
okay, just God, just God, just God,
Uh-huh.
right? I think that was effective at the time, right? And it wasn't like,
But in a way, that's still effective. Just give it a different language.
mhm,
So Einstein,
yeah,
right? Brilliant, like what was his IQ? We don't even know.
wow,
But he would always say, or things that I've read about him, he said that you can't just figure stuff out. You have to tap into something that's beyond your logical brain.
yeah,
And he would very often just work on a problem, and then just
yes.
sleep and wake up with the answer. And so here I'm going to show my lack of history and everything. But what
Well,
I've
then, yeah,
what I've heard about Mohammed is that he never did anything without God telling him to do it.
yeah.
He would like pray and pray and pray. So what if God wasn't talking to him, but what if he was Einstein?
Y-
Right?
Sure, right?
Right?
And it's
So
like, yeah.
yeah,
And
and so
for me, my interpretation is like how that's not different, right?
no, no, no. You're just talking a really, really brilliant person in a situation.
Yeah.
And he was already really rebellious and weird because, first of all, he was an orphan. So he didn't really have a tribe. So he didn't completely fit in, right? And
No.
then, second of all, he'd married this gal
Yeah.
who, like, how in the world did she manage to have property?
Yeah. It's
She must have been crazy smart and
yeah.
in your face,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
weird. It's like,
Yeah.
like who
So
you
he was like
expecting to be.
not completely part of the society.
No.
But now think about it, he was Einstein.
Yeah.
And so he's like, what's going on? What's going on? And I also heard that he would go and sit in the um, courtyards and like argue religion with everybody a
Oh,
lot.
interesting.
Yeah, and there were Christians there, and there
Yeah.
were Jews
Oh,
there,
yeah.
and there was all sorts of people there. So it
Yeah.
wasn't like there was just like, and then there would be all the people that had all the gods, and they're like
Mhm.
arguing, arguing, arguing. So he's
Yeah.
Einstein, and his brain's like, what? And then he goes and sits in the cave, right?
Yeah.
La ilaha illallah.
Yeah.
There's nothing
Yeah.
but the one,
Yeah.
the one God. And so he's talking to something. And we
Yeah.
can call that thing that he's talking to God,
Yeah.
just as easily as we can call it not God,
Yeah.
right?
Well, that's just the thing. Like even in the 99 names, I was just looking at that recently. There's no like uh nothing that explicitly says like nothing, right? Like in the 99 names,
Oh, really?
there's no, but there's just things that indicate it. So for example, right, like you have uh I think al-awwal, which is the first, and al-akhir, which is the last. And I guess you can kind of say that's like nothing, right? Like
Right,
I mean it implies it, and there's a bunch of other ones that just like imply it. Al-ghaib, the unseen, right? Things like,
right.
and so the thing that actually this relates to is I think the thing that Muhammad's method actually is effective because it can speak to fundamentalism and it can speak to esoteric truths at the same time. And it's one of the only ones that like does that. So like when you say like God is greater, it's like, well, that has meaning to um the not what's the opposite of esoteric? I'm trying to remember.
Uh, Pundits, dogma.
There's the dogma, right? But there's a esoteric, and I forget. Anyways, with like whatever, the public Islam, right? And the more like esoteric one, right? Like you can speak to both in both truths, right? Uh like that's true of, and I think like that's what he was trying to get at. See, like with, and Buddha was also really good at that too. I think Buddha actually, his system actually speaks to like a public. And also at the same time, it's like, okay, it's more nuanced than that, but yeah, that's true too. Right? Like I'm thinking of like the beginning stages, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Um, so it's weird, but I think, in a way, an effective system always kind of has to do that. Like speak to people in a way that it makes sense as an introduction, but also like when you advance and stuff, and when you actually just figure out the truth, it also makes sense as well, right?
Well, for any of these religions to actually become a religion that uh, served
Yeah.
large numbers of people, it had to have certain truths for your day-to-day life,
Yes.
or the people would have just fallen apart,
Hmm.
right? They wouldn't have been able to form any sort of communities.
Hmm.
They'd just be killing each other or
Yep.
or whatever,
Exactly.
right? So they all do kind of have these fundamental truths, but then
Yeah.
they also, so many of them just end up enslaving societies as
Well,
well.
because it's so easy to misinterpret it, right? And like, I mean, that's just the thing. This four paths thing, obviously, because we don't like, I learned about it recently too. It doesn't
Right.
exist anymore, right? Like this thing, like it doesn't, it's not an effective system, right? I mean, like you can find, and I'm saying this in a majority sense, right? Like
Right.
back then in historical Islam, like I would think like, in early Persia, when Islamic Golden Age and stuff was flourishing, I'm sure this thing was like just more known, right? But now it's like, I mean,
Well, it
um,
relies on having an enlightened sheikh at your disposal,
yeah, it would.
right? Right. And so, because you're preparing yourself to go
Yeah.
on this journey,
Hmm.
and then you need someone taking you on this journey.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
then you get to the end of it. And so here we are in our world today, and we don't have these uh, shakes.
No,
Oh, we have a whole new kind of uprising of awakened people who are talking about it in totally different ways. And so those are the
who are
shakes.
some names in mind that you
Oh,
have?
just all the people on the internet, Suzanne Maria, Deshanti,
Hmm.
the guy you just pointed me to,
Yeah,
Sadhguru, I mean, all these people, but you don't have somebody right there in your neighborhood
no.
keeping an eye on
See,
you.
that's just the thing. Like our culture is just so different now. And so
Right.
like I can't really say this is completely dead because I'm sure that there are villages out there where it's like, this is a thing still,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
But this is also useful for you know, the unification of truth too between religions. There's a lot of
Right.
interfaith dialogue that goes on. There's like even the Dalai Lama goes to like yeah, like interfaith what is it called? Like ceremonies and stuff, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And like it'll be like the Dalai Lama and then like the most famous priest and most famous sheikh, right?
Right.
Nowadays.
Right.
And it's just like, okay, well, this stuff helps, figure out what the heck uh fundamentalist dogmatic Islam is for. It's like, oh, it's just like the first stage, you know. And it's like that's an easy way even for like a perennialist or a theosophical person, right? Like this stuff is probably gonna have to be mentioned too, right? To try to just because that's the thing, when you read the Quran, right, you're gonna be like, oh, like this is very exclusive. Like, I mean, this is it's really trying to make this is the only truth, and there is no other truths and stuff. And it's just like, okay, well, how can that be reconciled with an inclusive truth? And it's like, oh, okay, well, with this, it's the same thing like concentrate back on your breath, concentrate back on your breath. Don't focus on anything else. It's like,
Right.
oh, that's just the message, right?
Yeah. Yeah. But so let's take these four steps and put them in a totally different context
Please.
and look at them, okay? Because we have let's see, what can I call it? We have a very shallow, self-serving spirituality going on these days.
Yeah,
People
I'm
are,
participating.
yeah. Are you eating Cheetos?
Some chips.
So a lot of people are wanting to just jump straight to step four,
Yeah.
right? And because we live in such a commercial and we've been trained to be consumers, we kind of think all we really need is the right outfit, and
Mm,
the right look, and we can go straight into step four. And so there's so many spiritual groups that are ignoring step one,
mhm.
which is very, very important because if you're going to be on the spiritual path or if you're going to be a human being at all, you better learn how to be a decent human being. And I mean, golly, I mean, you could really just get rid of all the other steps and go, step
Yeah.
one is kind of like the end step.
Yeah.
Really,
It's like
really good
'cause
human being.
so I'm taking psychology of good right now, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Very interesting. It's actually with the one professor I told you about, like
Did you
my
really? Yeah, yeah.
yeah. Um, oh, it's so good because like ironically, right? Uh, but it's we're talking about like even just define what is good. And it's just
Right.
like, okay, well, when we're just even reflecting on this, pro-social behavior is going to be a thing that comes up, right? Like obviously, right? Things
Uh-huh.
that benefit others and not just self, right? Pro-social as opposed to anti-social.
Right.
So, and that's like an important thing to us humans. For some reason, right? Like, ask anyone on the topic of good, just intuitively. Like,
Hmm.
pro-social behaviors is an idea that's going to pop in everyone's mind.
I listened to an interview once by, I think it was a gal who interviewed terrorists
Hmm.
in what's the big
Afghanistan.
mm, island. And she said the thing about like no matter what they've done and who all they've blown up and everything, you interview everybody and that person thinks they're the good one.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
we we need that goodness.
Yeah.
But like how do we, and it's complicated. Don't ever think that being good is like just straight out easy.
No.
It's not. It's not. I know that, you know, people that I know, some of the like most hurtful things I've ever done to other people, I was trying to do something nice for them.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I had this idea of what they needed. And I kind of just like pushed my way into whatever, and it turned out being very, very hurtful to them. And that was like really eye-opening to me. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry. I was trying to be good.
Well, so that also is a topic that came up too, right? The same teacher that taught psychology of good also taught psychology of evil. And so, like, what the heck is evil? And
Right.
like, again, right? When we're talking about evil, harm comes up in the mind, right? And what
Hmm.
the heck is harm?
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah, it's just like, like you said something interesting. You said, well, being good is difficult, right? So I'm gonna
Right.
ask, like, what is difficult about it, right? And I'm not saying like you're wrong. I'm just saying like, what is,
Well, because if you try to be good, you're going to constantly be bad,
yeah.
right?
So,
You're
well,
going to constantly be making mistakes and having to adjust. It's like riding a bicycle. You can't just you got it's like back and forth, back and forth, back and forth,
yeah.
adjusting and living and learning and yeah.
Well, I was gonna say, one of the coolest things I learned this year was like, or phrases and learning because I'm applying it to my life. It's like it's just you reflecting on this is so cool. But don't be a good person. Do good things, right?
Ah,
It's just like,
yeah,
okay, that makes sense because like
right,
being a good person is like that's like an identity. That sounds like ego, right? And it's
right.
just like,
And it's
okay,
fixed.
it's fixed. And you
Yeah,
also have to work really hard to like maintain that. And I
right,
mean, we're human beings imperfectly, so you're
right.
gonna mess up. And I don't think you're gonna probably want to admit it if you have this identity of a good person or you really want to maintain that.
That just makes me think. So imagine you think that you're a good person
Yeah.
and somebody tells you you just did something bad. It's going to be
Yeah.
really hard for you to adjust.
Yes.
But if your concern is to do good things and
Yeah.
somebody says, "Man, that thing that you just did really worked
Yeah.
out
Yeah.
really badly," then the next good thing to do would be to apologize.
Yeah.
Whereas if you think you're a good person, it would
Yeah.
be hard to
Well,
apologize, right?
and that to me emotionally sounds the difference between shame and guilt, right? Like you would just feel
Right.
guilty, right? When it's just like, but if your identity is being attacked, threatened, then
If your
you're gonna feel
identity,
shame, right? Like
yeah,
it's like, oh
yeah,
shit, I don't belong.
Uh-huh. Plus, being the doer is a verb instead of a thing, a noun. I'm a good person. It's kind of like, well, you do something, then you got to do something else, and you got to do
Yeah.
something else. And that's what that Navajo teacher describes as the red road,
Red
that you're
road.
just always, uh, it's not like a thing that has an end to it. It's the road that you're walking on
Yeah.
to, like, what do you do next?
What do I do next?
Yeah, and he gave like really lots of examples, like the people got, conquered and they're living in, poverty. And but so the men would like get up and walk and go like work on the railroad for a while to earn money to bring back to the family. So that's walking the red road, doing the
Uh-huh.
next thing that needs to be done.
So I'm hearing
Doing it.
sacrificial motivation,
Hearing what?
like sacrificial motivation.
Right, right, because they were doing it for somebody else.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so like when do humans do such kind of things, like sacrificial?
All the time. We're geared for it. Like I'm
Yeah,
reading,
I believe so.
yeah, yeah. I'm reading another anthropology guy.
Oh,
Can't remember what the name of the book is. I'll try to post it. But I first watched his video and he was talking about it, and they've been, they study humans to pieces, right? Trying to figure
mhm.
out what makes us tick. And they
I love
found out that like you got the monkey brain and you
it.
got the human brain. What's the difference between the monkey brain and the human brain? And they said all the parts of the human brain that grew big are our social interaction and communication
Mhm.
areas.
Mhm.
So we are like literally geared
Mhm.
to understand what's going on with other human
Yeah.
beings and respond to it.
And so this is why evolutionary psychology is my favorite one, right? Like
Right.
that's, yeah, I love it so much because if you look at it, so in our brain, right? If you look at the human brain or just look at it yourself, not even just neuroscientifically, um, you'll see that you really love efficiency. We love efficiency, right? Like we try to do things easy, right?
Yeah.
When
Yeah. We
easy,
love easy.
we love
Yes.
easy, right?
Yes.
And so we're actually geared towards that which is easy.
Yeah.
And so interestingly enough, I think like that same part of the brain is also part of the reason why we have social parts of our brains as well, because we notice, okay, when I get help from others, when I do things not just by myself, like things are easier, things are more efficient, right?
Right.
So our social brain and our efficiency brain is like one and the same, right?
Right.
And it's like they evolved together. And so when you say, "Oh, it's geared in us," I'm just like, yeah, actually, like that's historically what we learned how to do.
And the studies that I've been doing is making me believe that we've had to be seriously broken to step out of that at all. To the degree that we've stepped out of it, it's taken a lot of work to break us
Yeah.
that much. Like there was a now some Western guy went to a tribe, and one of the guys goes out and hunting and gets a deer and brings the
Mhm.
deer back. And the Western guy's saying, dude, you should dry that up and keep it for winter and everything. And the hunter just looked at him and he was like, what? And he just like cut it all up. And the whole tribe had a big feast and they ate it all.
Mm.
And the white guy's going, well, why did you do that? And he's like, well, how can I be full when everyone else is hungry?
Mhm.
Everyone, and besides, we had a really good party.
Mhm.
So I think it's taken some real serious mental breakage to break us out
Yeah,
of that.
yeah. But there must have been a reason for it too. Like there must have been some kind of trade-off, right? So we were probably using like my hypothesis
Yeah.
is that actually the same efficiency brain, we noticed that telling people shut up is a lot easier to getting them to shut up, right? Controlling people, it's a lot easier to control people when you tell them you don't belong, right? It's just like, oh,
Right.
they listen now instead of like having to, be nice and show them the way, It's
Right.
like the efficiency brain kind of, didn't help us in the long term, but maybe in the short term, right?
Yeah, well, one of the things that Tyson Yunkaporta talks about too is that people used to have a, I don't allergic reaction, or they, any kind of hierarchy, they just hated it.
Yeah.
There's even all sorts of there's a saying, uh, "You're not the boss of me,"
Yeah.
and we have that too. You're
Yeah.
not the boss of me. Little
Yeah.
kids
Yeah.
will say that until that gets beaten out of them. But now
Yeah.
in our society, we have been trained to feel that the hierarchy will make us safe and that our lives are easier if we're in the hierarchy. And it's true, because if you live in a situation where every single person has to take care of everybody else and everybody has to work together, it's a more difficult
Yeah.
uh, way to do it. I remember once when I was a young radical hippie, right? And my
Yeah.
dad's like this real totally conservative Republican Catholic guy, and not only that, he was the manager of a foundry. So he was this
Found.
managerial. Foundry is a place where they melt down steel and metal and turn it into things.
Oh, okay.
Like all the metal things that you see around, they all had it got melted down and made somewhere. So he was the manager, and so big business. And so I'm telling him, yeah, the man, capitalism and everything. And he just looks at me and goes, well, then how, if you want your society, how would you build a bridge?
Mm.
And I'm like, hmm, I don't know. How would enough people get together to build a bridge? I mean, just think about like what uh, how complicated that is. So it's really funny. I've kind of thought about that my whole
Yeah.
life. Like how would we build a bridge? And now that since I've read Tyson Yunkaporta and the Australians, they would say, why build a bridge? All the bridge is going to do is disrupt the landscape to the point where the ecology is not working right and the water's not flowing right and the animals are not able to
Yeah.
move around and the human beings aren't part
Yeah.
of the landscape anymore.
Yeah. So,
So
and
that's a radical change right
but
there.
but it is, but and it probably comes back. So I think, he's coming from a place of why do we want efficiency so bad anyways, right? You guys need a bridge. Do we need a bridge? Right? Is like,
Right,
and so like
right,
that's like the whole thing, but we
right,
feel we need it because it's efficient, right?
right.
And,
We
and I
can get from here to there really quick.
yeah,
Yeah,
quick. So quick, fast, easy. And it's just like I think this is the part of our brain that, actually itself needs evolution. That's probably the brain that's like, we are in the process of evolving, right? Like, I mean, and it's efficiency seeking is obviously like an emotional thing, right? Like motivation is, emotions, right?
laziness.
Laziness, or even just like yeah, sure, right? And just a desire for leisure and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm,
Escaping suffering in some kind of way or pain or
mm-hmm,
discomfort.
mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
but not knowing that, it if efficiency in the tools that we probably use or create, comes with some kind of price too, right?
right.
So process, right? I don't think there's like no answer ever to world peace, but
Well, in order to have less efficiency of things, we would have to have more ability to actually work with each other. Because truthfully, you get 100 people together, they could build a bridge
Mhm.
without a corporation, or, they could figure out how to build a bridge. But like, would they want to? Or maybe it does makes it, maybe it takes way more than 100.
Mm.
But so imagine trying to do it without any hierarchy. How
Yeah.
would it work? How would it work? You know, we're unable to even conceive of that. But you know, back to our 4 steps, if everyone was doing all 4 of these steps at the same time, and there wasn't a sheikh who was bringing everybody
Huh.
into it, you were considered a full member of the 4 steps from the day you
Hmm.
were born,
Hmm.
then how would we be relating to each other
Yeah.
differently?
Yeah.
Yeah. So here's another little story. We put on all these dance camps, right?
Mm.
And we used to have this one cook who would come cook for us. But spiritual people are very, very picky about their food.
Oh, what?
Extremely picky about their food. And every single one has a different pickiness that is the most important thing to them and isn't necessarily somebody else's pickiness. And
Mm.
so the cook would just have to constantly deal with this and constantly deal with this. And we'd put on these camps, and the food was just, and I mean, it was like the Gaza Strip.
Mm.
There was no coming together about it. Like, you wouldn't believe how militant people get if you try to feed them iceberg lettuce instead of
Iceberg.
romaine.
I'd get militant.
I love iceberg lettuce. It's all crunchy. So then what was really funny is one day I was out and I was going and looking for another camp to have a camp at. And so I go to this camp, and the people are walking me around, and I'm looking, here's the cabins and here's the kitchen. And I go walking up, and there's our cook.
Mm.
Her name was Martha. And I'm like, well, hello, how are you? What are you doing? And so she was cooking for a retreat that was going on at this camp,
Mm.
and it was spinners and weavers. So artisans, right? They would spin wool, and they would dye and wool, and they would weave it into stuff and knit it into stuff. And so they were like these creative, artsy, crafty people of every religion. I mean, religion never even came up to it.
Uh-huh.
And she's like, "Oh, I'm doing great." She says, "You wouldn't believe how wonderful it is to cook for these people.
Mhm.
They're not picky."
Uh-huh. Well, yeah, because she probably has to face so much like throwing it out, right? Like, all of her
Are
hard work.
just people, they're mean.
Yeah.
Spiritual people are really mean. And so like now put your four steps here right in for everybody to be there from the very beginning. And so that's the difference between the spinners and the weavers
Yeah.
and the spiritual people.
Yeah.
The spinners and the weavers, they're on a path, but their path is to create something beautiful out of wool
Mhm.
or cotton
Mhm.
or right.
Mhm.
And each one of them has part of the skill that they can teach somebody else. So everybody sits there in a circle, and they're like, "Well, how are you doing that?" And it's like, "Oh, I'm doing this. And look at this color over here. And oh my gosh, and you can mix this together with this and you get that. And oh yeah." And then one person over there has a really great idea. And then there's somebody who's brand new, and they knit something that's really funky looking, and everybody's like, "Oh, that's so cool. Look how funky that is." And so it's like, but they're doing the 4 steps, right?
Yeah.
There's not like this esoteric invisible goal. The actual
Yeah.
goal is in
Yes.
your hands, and you can
Hmm.
see it, and you can feel it, and you can be it, and the people
Yeah.
just get along in a
Yeah.
totally different way.
Yeah.
So, but all 4 steps are there.
Yeah.
They're all being nice to each other. You don't even have to tell them,
Yeah.
right? They're all on a path.
Yeah.
What are the other things? They're walking a truth. It's like,
Walk.
this works and this doesn't
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
It's like, look at what I just did. This is a disaster.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. You know?
Yeah.
And then everybody's walking and then just living this truth. So all 4 of those steps are going
I
on
love it.
in that
I
group
love it.
just naturally,
I love
right?
it. And
Yeah.
then, well, that's just it. It's like because I think the whole spoiler and like the whole thing that spoils like the whole system and all systems, it's like you already are that,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And it's like even
So
for
do
me,
all four steps at the same time.
mhm,
You walk in, you are walking around in truth. I mean, just think what a funny idea it is to argue about truth, right? That's just crazy idea.
exactly. And I think it probably the first time that like that made sense to me was Jiddu Krishnamurti when he said, "How many truths are there?
Right.
Like how many? Like there's only one.
Uh-huh.
Like
Well,
there's
that's
no
like
truth."
Mohammed running to Mecca and wanting to throw away all the idols, right? How many idols do you need in there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they were just selling them for like $15 anyways,
Right.
right?
Right.
But yeah. No, it's
Yeah, like we were just having this conversation. We're getting ready to go to a camp down in Mexico. And so there's a girl down there, and um, she's already there, and everybody else is coming pretty soon. And she runs across a musician, and she's talking to the musician. She's like, "Oh, dude, you should come, dance with us and play music with us." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, yeah, I'll come. I'll play music." And so she's like, "Can he just come play music?" And we're like, "Well, he kind of needs to pay for the retreat
uh,
if he wants to come." And so we're
yeah,
kind of like, and there's like already 20 guitar players.
yeah.
And so his response back was, "Oh, I'm already on a spiritual path. I don't need to come." And it's like, okay, so there's your number two step there,
Oh my
right?
God.
So his spiritual path is like divided. Like, how can you have all these
Exactly.
separate spiritual paths? I mean,
Yes.
would Krishnamurti say that same thing?
Yeah, yeah, for
We're
sure.
wandering around on our spiritual path.
Yeah. So I love it. And I was actually gonna text you the last time our last live stream. Um there was something I came across. I think it was the exact same day. And I really don't like to even look at like spiritual community stuff, spiritual conversations. I don't like even talking to people engaged in that, right?
Yeah.
But I came across it and and it's not even like I already have a big allergy to like new agey minds, but like man, just even I forget what it was. I forget the video, but I was like, yeah, like honestly, I want nothing to do with like spiritual dialogue, spiritual community stuff. Like when like I was gonna text you, I'm not even in the circles and like around the people you're around, but I just know like I would rip my hair apart being around that, bro. Because I'm just watching a video and wanting to rip my hair. So it's just like in this, this is why like, a lot of my professors like, have a lot of like prejudice to like mysticism and spirituality and stuff is because like this stuff is full of communities and minds that just are so fake, are just so like it's just so acting, it's so dishonest, and it's like even me like saying the
I
word
hate to say
spiritual.
dishonest because people are honestly trying, but it is acting.
That's what I mean by dishonest, right?
Yeah,
It's like
yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
I
Shallow.
think shallow. I
Hmm.
don't know. My analysis would just be like dishonesty has just turned habitual, and I don't think they're just conscious of it fully, right?
Hmm.
But I think it does come from a place of even just like looking within myself, my own conditioning. Every time I like peel layers down, it's like, oh, like I was lying. And it just became like habitual and like unconscious, right? But there
Oh,
was like some at times there are like I want to be different from this, and it's just like that's in a way that's just like a dishonest motivation, right?
right, right. So what? makes the big difference. It's really funny because I've been thinking about this a lot. And so I've been going and attending Suzanne Marie. She's a great non-duality teacher. I've been going and watching her talks and working with her a little bit. And so I sit there and I watch her talks and I'm like, what's the difference? Like, how could I explain what the difference is to listening to someone talk who knows and listening to someone talk who has read something somewhere and thinks they know? Like,
It's
how
weird.
can you put your finger on it? Because you can't, someone who doesn't know can't tell the difference between the two.
Yeah. Well, see, but maybe there are small signs. So, like, I mean, with me, I was raised to be very, very vigilant of liars. People that just like
Really?
my mom and my dad are just like very, very, very like vigilant of liars. Like anyone trying to rip them off in any kind of way, anyone dishonest. And it's almost like it's actually gone haywire because there are times where, people just send them an email and they're just like, right? But
Scam. All
yeah,
right.
and they're like it's and the way they also did business, very respectable actually, right? It was like very honest, very, very honest, right?
Right.
Um, so there's that where it's just like, I don't know.
How much of that do you think is in Islam? Because that's really interesting because Muhammad was a merchant,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, it's definitely embedded in the culture, but I mean, there are it like the thing is like there is still a lot of like I would say still a lot of like lying that goes on even culturally, right? Like in Arab culture and stuff. But the thing is, my mom and dad weren't raised in the Middle East. They were raised here, right? Like
Right.
they were raised in like Toronto, like
Yeah.
at like 5, 6, right? So they saw the BS of both cultures, right? And so I don't know, it's like I guess so I'm saying that because like when I came across you, it was hard to detect lying stuff. And like I mean like it just I was like, oh, like this person is just being honest. And it like I don't know. So like even when
Right. So what's the difference? So like,
I mean it's so
well,
I
it's
mean
hard to
I
say
guess
what
I
the
think
truth is, right? But it's also hard to say what is lying.
no no. At times I was
Oh,
like
okay.
my
Actually,
my
we
mom
have
was
we have chat people. Look, we actually have a
like,
chat
oh it's not.
person. And this is good. So this is Derek says, I think someone who knows isn't going to claim to be able to put truth or awakening very directly or literally into words. So that
Hmm.
kind of,
Yeah. Well so
that's a
humility.
nice way to say it.
So I always yeah, I would think I mean, I've been very judgmental on like, who's humble and who's arrogant. And that's almost arrogant in and of itself.
Yeah.
But it's I think that though is interesting. Like I mean, that could be like a kind of like an automatic intuitive perceptual thing going on where it's like
Uh-huh.
who's being humble at least.
Right.
And then this is what like the liberal parties do too, right? Like they really emphasize them presenting themselves as humble, right?
I'm the most humble.
Exactly. Which actually, and I'll say this, and that's what attracted me to people like Osho, actually,
Right.
because he wasn't afraid to be like, sure, I may look arrogant. I don't care to convince you I'm humble. I don't care if you think I'm arrogant. It's ordinariness. It's all ordinary. It's these
Right.
things don't even, that's what attracts. So to me, that was honest, right? And
Yes.
to me, that was just like, okay,
Indeed.
there's
Right.
something going on.
Right. Well, one of the things I noticed, listening to Suzanne Marie and kind of the same thing happens to me when I talk too, is that she doesn't just go completely in a straight line. because she's kind of like, well, this and this and this and this, and then that fits with that, and then that, da 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 da. And so it's like truth doesn't really have a straight line like that if you're trying to put it in
Yeah.
words.
So here's the thing, right? How to detect a truthful person. You know, when we look in psychology, I think what a fundamental law is like the we all our behaviors are like goal-directed behaviors, where we have agendas for things. It's like, okay, well, what do you think the agenda of a person here is, right? And it's just like, can no agenda human beings be detected, right? When it's just, I'm just there's no goal, there's no outcome.
Right,
And
right. And so that's kind of what it's like when you're listening to her. She's not really trying to convince you of anything. And that's kind of what Derek was saying in this post
yeah,
too.
yeah.
That, and so another one, Eckhart Tolle, right? Like he is the most rambling person you ever want to listen to. He's like,
I've actually never listened to
yeah. But I mean, if you can kind of like
it.
follow the river,
Yeah.
I mean, you kind of end up nowhere, which is
Yeah. Well, the
wait,
thing is, and a lot of his fan base is like very, very new agey. So
yeah, yeah,
one of the biggest artists right now, Kendrick Lamar, he had Eckhart Tolle featured on his whole album, right?
uh-huh,
Uh, and it's just like, I mean, it was a very new agey themed album. Like I was listening to it, right? They're very good, but like, I mean, you can tell his fan base is people who are seeking, oh, just love, heart chakra and all that stuff, right? So
right, right,
I don't know. And it also, and this is where I think, science, for me, I think if I was trying to like teach spirituality to someone, I would like teach them science too. I would teach them anthropology. I would teach them scientific method, right? And like critically thinking in science, right?
hmm.
And I think that's very, very helpful on the spiritual path,
And
right?
actually, arts,
Arts too, for sure.
music, and painting and arts, and that was the thing about the cook at the weaving and spinning place. Everyone was just engaged in their
Yeah.
human activity, right? They were all being honest.
Yeah.
Can't lie with a piece of fiber art.
Yeah.
It either looks like something or it doesn't, or it is what it is, right?
Okay.
So it really kind of is the big truth teller. Food, cooking is a big truth teller.
And
Help,
all those things like involve the process of integration. And if we go back to like the four stages thing, what
right?
you're trying to say is like it'll integrate like all of them, right? Like it's
Yes.
at once, right?
Right.
And
Don't go
I,
1, 2, 3, 4. At least go 4, 3, 2, 1.
and then that's facts because like I mean you tell me, right? Like I mean it just makes sense. You can't know who you are if you're disintegrated, right? Like you kind of need
Right,
to
right.
be
Which
integrated.
piece is me?
Yeah.
Right, right. Is what you're always trying to figure out.
And so
Instead
like,
of here's
we
me with all these pieces.
yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that, well, here's a question for you then. So one of the things that's really interesting about going into a spiritual thing is that you walk in and everybody's assumption is that you're unenlightened because everybody thinks the 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're never going to get to the four, right? Nobody thinks 4, 3, 2,
No.
1. So the basic assumption is that you're seeking. And if
Yeah.
you're seeking, you're by definition not enlightened. But then you go someplace else, like, the spinners and the weavers.
Hmm.
Everybody's just sitting there, and that you're never ever treated as if you're not enlightened
Yeah.
ever, because it's not even a thing.
Yeah.
Everybody is just a human being and a human being and a human being
Yeah.
all doing their thing. So spirituality is weird that way. How did it get broken that way?
So,
How is
you
that
know,
in Islam is my question.
how did it get
No,
oh,
you walk into the mosque,
yeah.
right? And you're going to pray. Is there the assumption that you're not something, or is
Yeah.
it, or are you just an integrated human being praying?
Yeah, it's interesting because like even there's like Advaita temples like near me and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even Swami Sarva Priyananda or something, right?
Uh-huh. Right.
Like I think we were discussing this last time, but it was like, how can you have the truth of, God and servant, right? And one, right? And
Right.
invite, how does this work? I don't have an answer to it. I don't
Right.
know. But I think his answer was just like, what was it? There was also another one. It was yeah, I mean, you just do the act until you recognize. Like it's just this is the method for right. And it's like, yeah, it's a hack. And it doesn't line up with the ultimate truth, right? But
Right. Right. But
I
what
don't
if
know.
you were treated as integrated from the day you were born, right?
Yeah.
And then your elders are just like pointing out, oh, look how all that fits together. And look at how all
Yeah.
that fits together. And let's do this thing here. And, and you're raised that way without ever that uh, concept that you're
Yeah.
broken to start out with. One of the things that you'll notice, like, you're on the internet a lot and you're always going
Too
around, and
much.
there's so many people who are doing healing ceremonies of this, that, or the other. So the basic assumption is that you need to be healed.
So that's what my I'm assuming too, right? And it's just like, but that's also a framework I also think is true to some extent.
Right, right. Everybody does need to be healed.
Yeah.
We're all very, very broken.
But and then you also have just the title alone of the video. If you know you can't be fixed, right? Or something. It was like if you know you
Something
can't,
like that, right?
yeah, something like that. And that was like so good. I love it.
I just come up with this stuff. I have
But that's
God is speaking to me.
not wrong,
No,
right?
nothing wrong with that. Yeah. So,
I always
oh
ask
my
my
gosh, we're at an hour and 15 minutes again. We could go
okay,
forever and forever and forever.
yeah,
So,
no,
anyway, thank you people who chatted with us.
heck yeah.
Too bad it takes me a whole hour of talking to think to look at the chat. But maybe I'll get better at it. Maybe I won't. Anyway, I'm going to be gone for a while,
Yeah.
but I don't know if I'll have time down in Mexico to do something. Send me
Hmm.
a text and find out if I do.
I
And if I
will.
do, I'll schedule one. Otherwise, when I get back, right?
Cool.
Yeah. Meanwhile, keep studying. You are involved in something that is changing so radically and is having an amazing impact on who we think we are as human beings.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah, I know. I mean, let's have that as the theme for next live stream because I have a lot to say about that.
Oh, like what? Like what?
Just like, just the fact that, we are all involved, right? And just even the goal of these pro-social acts and helping others figure out who they are. And just like that mission in and of itself, like the
Right,
possibilities of it, the difficulties of it, the barriers, right?
right.
Like there's a
That
lot of
everybody is one little tiny piece. Nobody's has to figure it out all by themselves, and nobody
exactly.
can. And it's not necessary for that to happen either.
Yeah,
Something amazing and different
not
is
necessary to have. Yeah,
is happening. Yeah.
yeah.
Where and there's so many
I see
pieces
it. I
coming
actually see
together.
it. It's really weird. Like
Yeah.
I see like I mean just like I don't know and I could just be like perceptually biased, but like man, I don't know, like all my professors are like mystics now, or at least like so much of them, right? And I'm just like, okay, I could be perceptually biased for sure, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's like I'm also looking at like my cousins who, take Islam very seriously, right? And I'm just like, oh, they're going towards more mystical stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like it's
Yeah.
I don't know though, right? But I
Yeah.
do think life is
Well,
tough.
these little things have big changes on society because it wasn't that long ago that somebody came up with the idea of survival of the fittest. Somebody interpreted Darwin to be
Yeah,
that. And it's had an amazingly negative effect on all of society
yeah,
because people really hate human beings right now
yeah,
because of the whole survival of the fittest philosophy that all we are is just killing each other and killing everybody and it's just battle 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 where
yeah.
now they're saying no, wait a minute, the biggest part of our brain is about social cooperation,
Mhm.
and evolution itself happens not because of survival of the fittest, but survival of the most cooperative,
Yes,
right?
I love it.
So just that little change right there can have a huge
Yeah.
impact on future generations, right?
And
Yeah.
it feels better too. The other one just like
Oh, it
I'm
feels,
always losing. I'm losing all the time.
I know, right?
Like I
Or
can't
I gotta
win.
kill everybody.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. That's our theme for next time. You write it out so that we remember.
All right.
And to the world out there, we have no idea when next time will be.
No.
We're in the flow of love.
Oh no, not yet. Not yet.
Oh no, look, we had somebody.
Oh,
Hold
someone
on,
joined.
hold on. It's our same guy back. Let's see if he can come back. No, it's a different guy.
No, it's the same guy.
Same guy.
Borash.
Oh, right. Hello, say something if you can. We're just finishing. Maybe his internet connection isn't good enough.
Alrighty.
Yeah, okay. Let's
My
call it
mom's
into
calling.
it. Yeah.
See ya.
Next time, buddy.
Bye bye.